So my rebuttal for the use of non-evidence-based practices would be that behavior analysts should only consult and carry out evidence-based practices and service delivery to their clients. In adherence to the ethics code and existing research, using evidence-based practices only provides credibility to treatment implementation, and it is trusted in the scientific community and with stakeholders. Behavior analysts should only implement evidence based practices to their clients that are in accordance with current research. It's stated in Code 2.01, entitled Providing Effective Treatment, dictating that behavior analysts provide services that are conceptually consistent with behavioral principles, based on scientific evidence, and designed to maximize desired outcomes for and protect all clients, stakeholders, supervisees, trainees, and research participants from harm. Thus, behavior analysts should rely on evidence based behavior principles to extend the pool of opportunities for a given client. Furthermore, public opinion tends to favor evidence based practices. A study by Fleury and colleagues found that respondents to a survey about evidence based practices found a majority viewed them as more credible than non evidence based practices. The provided graph dictates depicts the higher rates of credibility ratings for evidence based practices. That was shared by Fleury and colleagues from 2019. Ultimately, the impact is that up to 75% of children with autism use complementary and alternative medicine in efforts to help with symptoms. This can prove harmful to those children, as well as no scientific evidence being provided to back up the claim that these interventions that are not evidence based can help alleviate some symptoms of autism. As such, it is permanent that BCBA stay away from non evidence based practice, as it could negatively impact their clients. Said another way, engaging in non evidence based behavior practice, it would be to go against Code 3.01, as it would not be in the client's best interest.
Next, moving forward to the stance inside of 4 EBPs. Behavior analysts that explicitly implement evidence based practices rather than non behavioral interventions are utilizing reliable, scientifically validated, and effective treatments. This ensures that the client's possibility of positive outcomes increases with the use of evidence based interventions and treatments, which is the most ethical and beneficial option. By relying on evidence based practices, behavior analysts can show confidence in their decision making for specific treatments and interventions for the clients they are servicing. EBPs are a framework for guiding major decisions of practitioners. Using methods proven by science reduces the risks of potentially harming a client mentally or physically. Behavior analysts select and design interventions that are conceptually consistent with behavioral principles, that are based on scientific evidence, and that best meet the diverse needs, context, and resources of the clients and stakeholders. They select, design, and implement treatments with a focus on maximizing benefits and minimizing the harm or the risk of harm to clients and stakeholders. As stated in Code 2.13 or 213, it is crucial to select and design assessments that are based on scientific evidence before implementing any treatment for the client. It has been suggested that early intervention providers may have gaps in their evidence-based practice for ASD, which only hinder client outcomes and treatment processes. So the impact is that clients receiving ABA services from behavior analysts that utilize evidence-based practices have a higher likelihood of mastering their target behavior goals. Behavior analysts also hold an ethical obligation to their clients, and if evidence-based practices are used, clients' treatments are proven effective and keep them from harm in the process. Individuals with ASD will flourish behaviorally and functionally in programs that take an evidence-based approach or stance.
The rebuttal for that is that behavior analysts that rely solely on evidence-based practices put their clients at a disadvantage in times when a case might be unique or needs to deviate from evidence-based practices to best fit the need of the individual. To sometimes stray from evidence-based practices will ensure that every client's treatment is ethically sound for their needs that must be met. One of applied behavior analysis's greatest strengths is the ability to individualize treatments to each client, to meet them where they are, and to work on the goals that are most important to the client and also to their stakeholders or caregivers. Behavior analysts that stray from using only evidence-based practices create a more personalized approach for each client. At times, this can be more appropriate and individualized for the behaviors being treated. It is important for a behavior analyst to view each client as an individual who's different from each other client and has different needs and priorities. Showing flexibility in treatment programs gives complex cases room to be effective rather than just relying on evidence-based practices alone, which could negatively impact the unique clients. To maximize clients' behavioral outcomes, it's important to combine the strengths of multiple disciplines rather than just relying only on scientifically proven evidence-based practices in some situations. Utilizing flexible intervention styles and straying from solely evidence-based practices can lead to higher achievement and mastery of target behaviors in an ABA setting. Ethically, the client should come first in all treatment plans based on Ethic Code 3.01. Catering to the needs of the individual clients may sometimes require some flexibility and creativity, as long as the client is still safely progressing towards their goals. And the argument against using only EBPs is that behavior analysts should be able to use non-evidence-based practices as necessary to maintain a good relationship with the family if the behavior analyst has determined that the non-evidence-based practice will not cause harm to their client, either directly or through decreasing the number of hours spent using evidence-based practices. One of the core principles for behavior analysis, according to the ethics code published by the BACB, is to benefit others, which means that behavior analysts should take into consideration the potential positive and negative effects that a non-evidence-based practice may have on the client. From then, they'll have to weigh the positive versus the negatives and make a decision. The ethics code states through code 2.09 that the behavior analyst should make reasonable efforts to include caregivers and stakeholders in the treatment of the client. If a caregiver or a stakeholder presents the behavior analyst with a new therapy technique that they have just heard of, the behavior analyst has a responsibility to listen, because they should make an effort to include the caregivers and stakeholders in the development of treatment procedures for the client. Furthermore, if the behavior analyst determines that this treatment is not yet considered an evidence-based treatment for any reason, which could include that this treatment is so new that there's just no published literature on it yet, the behavior analyst must then determine the amount of harm that using this technique in their practice might do. If the risk of harm is great, then the behavior analyst should appropriately explain this to clients or stakeholders and explain that we can't use this particular technique because of the harm that it may do to the client. And again, the client is the number one priority for a behavior analyst based on the ethics code. If the risk of harm is less severe, though, the behavior analyst may determine that it is actually in the client's best interest to use the technique so that the behavior analyst maintains a good relationship with caregivers and stakeholders. It's important to note, again, that the BACB Ethics Code states in Code 3.01 that the best interest of the client is what's most important, meaning that things shouldn't be adjusted purely to appease stakeholders or caregivers, but that their influence is necessary in determining what kind of procedures should be implemented. Maintaining the relationship with stakeholders and caregivers is crucial for the behavior analyst, because when a parent has a better understanding of the programming and feels that they have a say in the programming and what is worked on, they're going to be more likely to implement those techniques outside of therapy hours, and that actually might increase the total amount of time that the client is exposed to evidence-based practices, and that was found in a study by Fleury and colleagues from 2019. When those around the client help to implement the evidence-based practices, even when the client isn't at a therapy session, the client learns to generalize those skills to other environments and new situations. This also helps the client learn the skills through consistency, as the expectations for the client are going to be the same or similar in many scenarios. And this, in combination with the generalization of skills, might actually help the client retain the skills over a longer period of time. Overall, if you have a good relationship with the family, there's likely to be an increased family involvement in the therapy, and that can promote consistency, generalization, and longevity of skills.